I'm Reverend Hannah. I am a priest in the Anglican Church Canada in the Diocese of Huron, and I work in Indigenous ministries. And in my community, we often start our gatherings with a story. So I would like to tell you a story. When my grandmother was young, Pearl Harbor was attacked during World War II. And because she was of Japanese descent, although she was born in Canada, she became an enemy alien. She was registered, given a number, and taken off to the internment camps. First to a camp in Vancouver where she was living in an animal stall, and then later into the interior of BC to several different camps. And later, when they all came out of the camps, all the Japanese came out of the camps, in 1949, she moved to Ontario, and she started a family. And she and her family made a very conscientious effort to live in the present, to find ways to be part of their community, to be Canadian, and not necessarily to forget the past, but perhaps to let it lie. And then when September 11th happened and the Twin Towers were attacked, she was pretty terrified. And she was pretty terrified because she did not want to see Canadian and American-born Muslims rounded up and put into camps the way she and her family were and her community. And so what she decided she was going to do was she was going to start telling her story. She was a little old grandma in her 70s, and there wasn't a whole lot she could do, but she could tell her story. She could remind people of what happens when you give in to the power of hatred and fear of your neighbor. She could remind people of what happens when you turn everyday folks who live next door to you into your enemy. But as she was telling these stories of pain and suffering, of trauma, she was also telling us stories of all the people who showed up in many different ways to help. The farmers who took over land and property to make sure that they weren't taken by the government and sold off. People who showed up to make sure that there was food and shelter. The Anglican nuns that showed up in her camp to help. And then later, the people who became her friends and her family when they weren't even allowed to eat at the same restaurants or live in the same neighborhoods because they were two different races. So I say this story because I'm reminded of her this Lent, this season that we're in, because it feels like a season where there's a lot of darkness, there's a lot of fear and hatred, there's a lot of making an enemy out of our neighbors. And while I don't have a lot of power to do much, I can do exactly what she did, which is speak up and tell a story, not just of the dangers of turning into a hateful group of people, but also the hope that exists in times like this. The hope that everyday people give us when they show up and they care. So, what I'm inviting you into over the next 40 days of Lent is something a little special. We all need hope right now. Hope is a muscle that we get to exercise. And when we exercise it, it makes us bigger and stronger and harder to defeat. And so I'm inviting you into the next 40 days with me of sharing and hearing voices speaking from around the world about the hope that we can find right now and about how we cling to the light in the darkness. And I'm hoping you'll join me on that journey, and I'm hoping you will watch and share and even share your own stories with us. I'm hoping that you will pray and send positive vibes. Hold things up to the universe in whatever way you do. And I'm hoping that this will help us all build a little network of light in the darkness as we go across these next 40 days. So please join us on our Facebook page, 40 Days of Hope. The link is in the description of this video. Join us on our diocesan YouTube channel. The playlist is 40 Days of Hope. It'll also be linked here. You can also follow us on TikTok for shorter videos, and that will be 40 Days of Hope as well. And I would just ask you that this Lent, instead of giving up, let's rise. Let's build. Let's ignite ourselves as a light against the darkness. Thank you.